JAX may abstracted already in episode 3, and this is hinted at by the events of the pilot and second episode, as well as some official concepts. In the pilot episode, we saw that JAX is a cheerful bully whose actions, although a little bit angry, can still cause a smile. However, in the second episode, this guy is revealed to us from a completely different side, and we see a rude maniac who is ready to sacrifice everything for his pleasure, and he absolutely does not care what will be the consequences. And if the bullying of Gangle has already become a common phenomenon, then the opening of the gate for Fudge Monster completely confirmed the fact that there is something wrong with JAX. Also very important is the final scene where we saw Kaufmo's funeral, and that JAX is a bit sad that no one cares about him. So in just 2 episodes, we saw a huge range of emotions and actions from JAX, and that uncertainty makes you wonder. If we look at Ragatha, it's obvious that she is an insecure but at the same time very kind character. Or Kinger has always been a bit strange, and we know it for sure, but we can't say anything definitive about JAX. And this is the first signal, because Kaufmo also, before he started to turn into an abstracted monster, behaved very strangely and constantly changed his behavior and mood. However, before we talk about JAX and why it will lead to his abstraction, only after we refute the nonsense that JAX is an NPC, because in that case, JAX is not subject to this phenomenon. Although this theory is very popular lately and many people believe it, but just one post from Gooseworx completely nullifies all speculations. JAX has an officially confirmed age of 22 years old, and that alone is enough to realize that JAX is human. Before analyzing what happened to JAX and drawing a conclusion, let's talk about some hints from Gooseworx. After the scene with Kaufmo, we realize that this can happen to absolutely any character in the digital circus, and even though JAX seems to be the most stable, the official concepts tell us that even this character can feel sad and depressed, which was most clearly shown by the final of the second episode in which JAX stood there, distantly watching everyone else strengthen their bond with each other, and instead of trying to get closer to each other, he became more and more distant from them, and no one feels close to him. In the pilot episode, though, we never once saw JAX alone. He was with someone all the time, and even though I don't think he was very welcome, he was still with them. And now we often see him left out, and JAX realizes that the longer this goes on, the worse the consequences will be. And that makes him both angry and sad at the same time. A long time ago on my channel, I said that JAX only wants to seem cool, but in reality, he is an insecure guy who wants support like the others. But because of his original role, he doesn't get it. And this is clearly shown in the scene where JAX very carefully tries to hint to Kinger and Gangle that Kaufmo will not return to them. And apparently these events aggravated the state of JAX that led to those actions, or more correctly to say crimes that we saw in the second episode. And also important is his so-called bipolar disorder, which was expressed in a sharp change of his mood in episode 2. But before that, I want to tell you about the recent leaks where we were shown the rooms of all the characters, and JAX's room is not one of them, just a door. And if you remember Kaufmo's room, which was more like a mental patient's room, what if JAX's room is going through similar changes, and that's why the creators didn't want to show it to us? Now let's get back to JAX, and I'll tell you all about it in detail and in order. And I was correct in calling all of his actions crimes. And the first thing JAX did when he saw that they were given the truck was to run and take the driver's seat, thus confirming his status as an egoist who doesn't care about the desires of others. And then, after the disappointment, he forcibly put Gangle in the truck, even though it was obvious that she didn't want it. Then the most significant act was the mocking of Pomni when JAX, because of his crazy ideas, decided that throwing Pomni on a neighboring truck would be a good idea. In the end, it almost got Pomni killed, for which she was rude to the bully. Well, without rude blackmail also did not do without, and the victim was already familiar to us in this role, Gangle. And the object of blackmail was some figurine, and apparently still in the digital circus, JAX helped Gangle to hide something, and in the end, she fell into eternal captivity to him. But that's just the beginning, and his most brutal crimes begin a little later. The meeting with Fudge Monster became the key event in revealing JAX's identity, and we have already said a little about it. But everyone remembers the fragment where JAX and Fudge Monster made a deal, in which Fudge was to help catch alligators and take them out of the abyss, and in exchange for this, JAX would give the key to the city that Fudge needed for revenge for past offenses. And at the time of the deal, JAX was very excited and happy, and I think it was not because they would finally be able to get out of the abyss and find the robbers, but because of what would happen next. As we know, the help in catching the alligators was not needed, so JAX could have defaulted on his commitments. But for our rabbit, it would not be interesting, and here we are approaching the main crime of JAX, because of which he can be punished. And the degree of punishment depends on Kane's wishes. JAX has committed mass murder at Candy Canyon Kingdom, and you can argue that he did nothing with his own hands. But look at the excitement and happiness he felt when he realized that he left the gates to the city open for a reason, and realized that this terrible voice is his old friend Fudge, who will destroy the entire kingdom in the next hour. And here there is a dilemma, because no one knows the fate of the kingdom after the end of the test, and it is likely that it just disappeared and no one was hurt. But none of us, including JAX, know this for sure, which means that the rabbit already had a plan to wreak havoc in the kingdom and was well aware of the consequences for all its inhabitants after his so-called jokes. I'm sure that if JAX knew that the location would disappear after the adventure was over, he would have just closed the door, but he was sure that there would be ruins left behind. And this says about JAX only that he is a sadist and a killer who for the sake of his pleasure is ready to sacrifice absolutely anyone, and he does not care who it will be, an ordinary NPC or a living person. And his attitude towards everyone is expressed in his behavior, and in contrast to him, we can say about Pomni, who also has a huge influence on the second episode. When Pomni and Gummy Goo, who is also not a living character but an ordinary game NPC, get into the back room, Pomni, instead of mocking the fact that the alligator found out that everything he remembered and knew simply doesn't exist, on the contrary, tries to somehow support him, calm him down, befriend him, and it seemed to me that she even took a friendly liking to him. Or the same Regatha, when she found out about the monstrous events in the kingdom because of Fudge, she could not find words to describe it while JAX was happy with such news. But the most important thing was hidden at the end of the second episode, but we'll discuss it after a little nostalgia for the pilot episode. Right away we remember how JAX mocked Pomni at the time when she first got into the circus, and while everyone else was somehow trying to convince her that it wasn't that bad, JAX was directly telling her that she was close to going crazy, or how he dumped the girls when he was scared of Kaufmo and then talked to Kinger and Gangle in a mocking manner. I'm not even talking about his attitude towards Gangle, because you already know that she is his main target, not only in the pilot, but also in the second episode, and we see JAX getting more and more alienated from the others, and everyone mentally feels it, especially Pomni, who experienced a hallucination and saw the support from everyone in the circus, from Ragatha, Gangle, Kinger, and even the very harsh Zubul. But JAX is again not present here, and here we realize that JAX is a recluse and a maniac who could quite possibly become a major threat to everyone else. Well before now, it's time to recognize that JAX could very realistically become the main antagonist in the digital circus. He's a terrible friend, an unreliable comrade, a bully, a joker in the worst sense of the word, and a real sadist who apparently doesn't need anyone's support, and because of that he allows himself much more than everyone else. Or on the contrary, JAX is too much in need of attention and tries to attract the attention of others with all his actions. But in any case, both options lead to the inevitable, the complete negation of the rabbit by all the other characters, and as a result, a possible abstraction. And after we have understood all the aspects of such a character as JAX, and based on the facts of the first part of the video, I can safely say that JAX will definitely disappear from the series, and it's only a matter of time. Of course he is loved and appreciated by many people, but as we realized from the Gummy Goo situation, Gooseworx has no authority and doesn't care what the fans think, and turning JAX into an abstracted monster would be the perfect ending to his life in the digital circus. What do you think about it? I'm waiting for your feedback in the comments, and in the meantime, enjoy new theories about the events of the second episode.